ist uns verschrieben unter Fallen mit Leib.
First, Nazi Germany took over Austria, then Czechoslovakia, and in 1939, they stormed into Poland. The objective was to continue eastward to invade the Soviet Union. But after Poland, Adolf Hitler turned the guns and tanks provided to him to the empire that had created him in the first place, the British. All their allies in Europe fell to the Nazi machine and were quickly enclosing on the British themselves. Reluctantly, they turned to the United States of Franklin Delano Roosevelt for help. With the United States economy having been rescued from the Depression by a Glass-Steagall financial reform, leading to the reinvigoration of America's productive power, the U.S. was the only force on the planet capable of defeating the fascist threat that had been fostered by the British Empire. Roosevelt agreed to join the British to destroy the Nazis, but on August 1941, off the harbor of Argentia, Canada, Roosevelt made it crystal clear that after the war, there will be no British Empire, no colonies of India, no stealing of the mineral resources of South Africa, or Morocco, or Iran, no international imperial monetary system, but a system of sovereign governments.
Mr. President, I believe you are trying to do away with the British Empire. Every idea you entertain demonstrates it. But in spite of that, we know that you constitute our only hope. And you know that we know it. You know that we know that without America, the empire won't stand.
Roosevelt's untimely death was the only thing that halted the full elimination of the empire, and with that, they were free once again to carry out their policy of global genocide by monetary rule. That is the role of the British Empire's assault team known as the Inter-Alpha Group of Banks. It is only this apparatus which is now the biggest threat to the United States and the world, but whose greatest fear is the re-implementation of Franklin Roosevelt's Glass-Steagall banking standard by our United States.
Lynn, the next question is something I discussed with you earlier. It refers to a similar situation. And I know that the person who asked the question, who is a very prominent American economist and also a strong supporter of the readoption of Glass-Steagall, would like your answer for the record. Now, Lynn, the questioner, says, Lynn, I'd really like you to comment on this because I was completely taken aback by it. I recently had the opportunity to participate in an affair at the London School of Economics. The details of the affair itself are not important. It was a commemorative ceremony, she says. I happened to be sitting at the table with some officials from the British Finance Ministry. And during the course of our conversation, the issue of Glass-Steagall came up. I was not necessarily surprised that my British friend might oppose it, but I was surprised when he informed me that any move in the United States to re-adopt a Glass-Steagall framework would in fact be viewed as a hostile act by Great Britain and by the nations of Europe. I assured him that we were simply trying to clean up our own banking system, and that in fact he was the farthest thing from our mind. But I do in fact wonder why they would be so concerned with this. He went so far as to say that that someone from the British Foreign Office would be contacting their counterpart in the US State Department to make this position clear. So my question to you, Lynn, is twofold. Number one, what's going on here? And number two,
Why would the British fear a U.S. returning to Glass-Steagall? What's the big deal? The big deal is that it will bankrupt the Inter-Alpha group of banks and their drive to kill off the majority of the world's population. And the bankruptcy of the Inter-Alpha group is the intent of a push for Glass-Steagall now. The legacy of this group is the most recent manifestation of an empire whose roots reach back into the monetary and financial usurious methods of the maritime power Venice. Classic Venetian monetary manipulation gained them the debt slaves they needed to take control over international trade and finance, which began heavily in the 13th century. In that period, the Venetian Empire dominated the international bullion market and dictated what currency could be used in China, India, and most of Europe, and later establishing the Venetian gold ducat as the international currency of trade. This is what and how they ran the known world then, the monetarist system. While running the monetarist empire, Venice subverted countries and kingdoms into long wars, such as the 100 Years' War between France and England, through their Wall Street-like banks in Florence, Italy. The effect of this policy of continual wars, not only in Europe, but in Asia through their control over the operations of the Mongolian barbarians, unleashed a wave of chaos that culminated in the bankruptcies of kingdoms, the Wall Street banks of Florence, and opened the floodgates to hell, otherwise known as the 14th century European Dark Age. Thirsty for genocide and to maintain their imperial position as the world's monetary power, in the late 1500s, the Giovanni New Venetian Party sought to move their maritime base to England and the Netherlands. There, they created the Bank of Amsterdam, the Dutch East India Company, and the British East India Company, with the British East India Company taking over England to eventually create the British Empire. Just like its mother, the British Empire of today is based on controlling the organization of money, giving them complete power to manipulate and speculate on all national currencies at will.